had 30 seconds before the black sedans pulled up, and the bullets shattered the windows. My hand shook just enough to smear the ballpoint ink as I folded the receipt into quarters. The paper felt thinner than tissue, like it might disintegrate before it reached her. Around me, the azure pearl hummed with the low frequency of wealth, crystal against porcelain, muted laughter, the whisper of cashmere against leather booth seats. Outside, the city's evening rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows in silver rivulets. But in here, everything was warm. Too warm, suffocating. I approached table 7 like I was walking toward my own execution. Malia Booth sat with her back to the glass wall, the city glittering behind her like a throne of lights. She looked like she'd been carved from obsidian and ice. Sharp features, dark hair swept into an elegant knot, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my brother's entire year of hospital bills. Her hand rested on the table, fingers adorned with silver rings that caught the candlelight. Beside her sat an older man in wire-rimmed glasses, reviewing contracts with the intensity of someone negotiating war treaties. He probably was. She looked like a woman in complete control. She wasn't. 25 minutes ago, I'd heard her driver order her death. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The employee corridor at the Azure Pearl wasn't really a corridor. It was a narrow service hallway between the kitchen and the private dining rooms, all harsh fluorescent lighting and industrial tile that made the restaurant's luxury feel like a stage set. I'd been carrying a tray of emptied plates toward the dish station, threading my way past prep cooks and busboys, when I heard a voice. Female, low, speaking rapid Spanish with an accent I couldn't quite place. I froze beside a stack of linen carts, my hands still gripping the tray. Sí, ella saldrá por el frente como siempre. Ten a tu gente lista. Yes, she'll exit through the front like always. Have your people ready. My Spanish was restaurant level at best, enough to understand when the line cooks were complaining about orders or joking about their shift. But I caught fragments clearly enough to know this wasn't kitchen gossip. Mesa 7 cerca del vidrio. Table 7, near the glass. The tray in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Tres en posición afuera. Uno en el callejón trasero. 3 in position outside. 1 in the back alley. My breath caught. The air in the service hallway, overheated from the kitchen exhaust, suddenly felt arctic. She switched then, her voice dropping to something that sounded like Portuguese, faster and sharper, like she was rapping, razor wire around her words. I couldn't parse the language, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confirmation, a countdown. Footsteps approached, designer heels clicking against industrial tile. I pressed myself against the linen cart, praying the shadows and stacked tablecloths would hide me. Through the gap between the cart and the wall, I caught a glimpse of her. Yara Castillo. Malia Booth's driver for the past 3 years. Tall, athletic build, wearing black slacks and a leather jacket that looked both professional and dangerous. Dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail. She carried herself like security, like muscle, like someone you'd trust with your life. She disappeared toward the staff exit, and her cologne lingered, something woody and expensive that now smelled like a funeral arrangement. I stood there for 10 seconds, 15, 20, waiting for my legs to remember how to work. When I finally stepped back onto the restaurant floor, plates forgotten, my brain was sprinting through what I'd heard. Table 7 near the glass, 3 in position outside, 1 in the back alley, front exit. I stepped into the dining room and everything clicked into focus with horrifying clarity. Table 7, corner booth, Malia Booth and her attorney, discussing what looked like property acquisitions or territorial agreements, the kind of business that respectable people conducted over aged whiskey and pan-seared duck breast. She was Korean Mafia. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud. The woman who controlled half the city's port operations and gray market distribution. The one whose name made councilmen nervous and prosecutors cautious. And her driver had just sold her out. I scanned the restaurant with new eyes, my serving tray pressed against my chest like a shield. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see two men in dark jackets standing beneath the awning across the street, not sheltering from the rain, watching. A third leaned against a lamp post near the valet station, pretending to smoke. Inside, near the host stand, a man in a tailored coat nursed an espresso he hadn't actually drunk in 15 minutes. He wasn't reading the menu. He was watching table 7. My heart kicked against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack bone. I looked back at table 7, at Malia Booth, signing a document with smooth, precise strokes, completely unaware that the woman she trusted to drive her home had just orchestrated her execution. That in less than 15 minutes, when she walked out that front door and Yara pulled the car around, 3 men with guns were going to make sure she never made it inside. I could walk away. Clock out early. Say I felt sick. Let whatever was about to happen just happen. Women like Malia Booth didn't end up in my world by accident. She'd earned enemies. Maybe she deserved this. But then I thought about my brother lying in that hospital bed on the east side, hooked up to machines that beeped his life in steady intervals. I thought about every nurse who'd stayed late to hold his hand when I couldn't be there. Every doctor who'd fought insurance companies to keep him breathing. I thought about mercy, unearned and freely given. I thought, I can't just let someone die. So I grabbed a receipt from my apron, clicked my pen, and wrote 7 words that would either save her life or end mine. My reflection in the wine glasses looked ghost pale as I made my way to table 7. Each step felt like walking through water, time stretching and contracting. I was hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of polyester against my skin, the squeak of my shoes on marble, the way the rain against the windows sounded like static. "You're Glenfiddich, ma'am." My voice came out steady, professional, like I hadn't just overheard a murder plot, like my hands weren't shaking. I set the crystal glass down on the white tablecloth, neat and precise. The whiskey caught the candlelight, glowing amber. And then I did the thing that every server is trained never to do. I touched her. My thumb pressed against the back of her hand as I slid the folded receipt beneath her glass. The contact lasted maybe half a second, a violation of every rule, every boundary between her world and mine. Malia Booth's eyes snapped to mine. They were darker than I expected. Not cold, but calculating. The kind of eyes that saw through skin and bone straight into intention. Her gaze held mine for a beat too long, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not attraction, but recognition. Like looking into the eyes of a wolf that could either let you pass or tear you apart. "Read it," I mouthed. "Please." Her fingers curled around the receipt, palm covering it completely. The attorney beside her continued talking, oblivious. She lifted her glass, took a slow sip of whiskey, and with her other hand, unfolded the note beneath the table where he couldn't see. I stood there, tray clutched to my chest, watching her face for any reaction. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a flinch. Just those dark eyes scanning the 7 words I'd written in my messy, panicked handwriting. "Your driver sold you out." They're in position. Then her jaw tightened. Imperceptible unless you were looking for it. The smallest tell. She knew. Malia Booth set her glass down with a soft clink that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. When she spoke, her voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "We're leaving. Now." The attorney blinked, looking up from his papers. "What?" We haven't even— now. She stood, buttoning her jacket with movements that were too deliberate, too controlled. Then she turned to me, really looked at me for the first time, taking in my name tag, my face, the fear I couldn't quite hide. Kimber Duarte, she read slowly, her accent turning my name into something foreign and dangerous. You're coming with me. My throat closed. What? Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, I saw one of the men reach into his jacket. Unless you'd prefer to stay and explain to them why their plan failed? Malia's hand closed around my wrist, not rough, but absolute. Move. And just like that, my 30 seconds were up. The first gunshot shattered the front windows before we'd taken 3 steps. Glass exploded inward in a glittering cascade, and suddenly the Azure Pearl's carefully cultivated atmosphere of wealth and refinement dissolved into screaming chaos. Diners threw themselves under tables. Someone knocked over a wine rack, and bottles shattered like grenades. The maitre d' hit the floor, blood blooming across his white shirt from a wound I couldn't see. Malia's grip on my wrist turned to iron. Kitchen, now. She pulled me toward the back of the restaurant, with the kind of speed that suggested this wasn't her first ambush. My feet tangled in my own apron as I tried to keep up, and I caught a glimpse of the man from the host stand pulling a weapon from beneath his coat. 2 more men burst through the shattered entrance, silhouettes against the rain and emergency lights outside. Down! Malia shoved me behind a marble column as bullets punched through the decorative panels above us, sending splinters of wood and plaster raining down. The sound was nothing like movies made it seem. Sharper, angrier, each shot cracking through the air like a physical blow. The attorney who'd been sitting with her was face down on the floor, hands over his head, already forgotten. Smart man. Malia moved like water around the column, and suddenly she had a gun in her hand. Compact, black, pulled from somewhere in her jacket I hadn't seen. She fired twice without hesitation, and one of the men at the entrance dropped. The other dove behind the host stand. You know how to run? She asked, not looking at me. What? Run. Do you know how? Yes, obviously. Then do it. She fired 3 more shots in rapid succession, providing cover as she hauled me toward the swinging kitchen doors. We burst through into controlled chaos. Line cooks abandoning their stations, sous chefs shouting in 3 different languages, someone screaming about calling the police. The head chef saw Malia and immediately pointed toward the back exit, his face carefully neutral. He'd clearly been trained for this scenario. We ran past industrial stoves still blazing with blue flame, past prep stations where vegetables lay half-chopped, past the walk-in freezer with its heavy door hanging open. My lungs burned. My cheap work shoes skidded on tile slick with spilled cooking oil. Behind us, the kitchen doors slammed open, and men's voices shouted in that same Spanish I'd heard Yara speaking. Malia spun mid-stride and fired backward without breaking pace, forcing our pursuers into cover. How many outside? She demanded. 3. I saw 3 outside, 1 in the alley. The alley's compromised. She grabbed a prep cook by the collar, said something in rapid Korean, and he nodded frantically before pointing to a service exit I hadn't even noticed. A narrow door camouflaged against the industrial shelving. We crashed through into a narrow corridor that smelled like garbage and rain. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. Malia's phone was already in her hand, pressed to her ear as we ran. Jong, Azure Pearl, service exit 3, 30 seconds. She listened for a beat, her expression hardening into something that looked like carved stone. Yara's not coming. Yara's dead. Move. The words hit me like a physical blow even as we burst out into the alley. Rain hammered down, immediately soaking through my uniform. The night air tasted like exhaust and ozone. Emergency lights from the front of the building painted the wet pavement in strobing red and blue. A black SUV screeched around the corner, tires spraying water. The back door flew open before it even stopped moving. Malia shoved me inside hard enough that I sprawled across the leather seats. Then she was in behind me, gun still in her hand. "Drive," she ordered, and the SUV lurched forward. Behind us, two figures emerged from the service exit, weapons raised. Bullets sparked off the armored rear panel as we fishtailed around the corner and into traffic. The driver, a young Korean man with a scar across his jaw, wove between cars with the precision of someone who'd done this before, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching back to hand Malia a tablet. She was already pulling up security feeds, her face illuminated by the blue glow. I watched her scroll through camera angles of the restaurant's entrance, the dining room, the kitchen. She zoomed in on the front entrance where the valet station had been. The space where her car should have been waiting was empty. No sleek black sedan. No Yara. "She didn't even show," Malia said, her voice flat and cold as winter. "She knew the exact timing, the exact exit. She sold the entire route." I pressed myself into the corner of the seat, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. My uniform was soaked through with rain and sweat, and possibly someone else's blood. I don't understand what's happening." Malia's eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time I saw something other than calculation there. Fury. Pure, concentrated rage that made the air in the SUV feel suddenly thin. "What's happening?" she said quietly. "Is that you just saved my life and made yourself a target. They saw you warn me. They saw you leave with me." She leaned forward, and I could smell her perfume mixed with gunpowder. "So congratulations, Kimber Duarte. You're in this now." The SUV merged onto the highway, and through the rain-streaked windows, the azure pearl disappeared behind us, just another lit building in a city full of them. Somewhere back there, Yara Castillo was probably already collecting her payment. And somewhere ahead, I was driving toward a life I'd never chosen, but could never escape. "Where are we going?" I whispered. Malia's smile was all edges. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can figure out exactly how much you're worth to me alive." The first hint that we weren't safe came 3 minutes into the highway when headlights appeared in the side mirror and didn't fall back. "Jong," Malia said quietly, and the driver's eyes flicked to the rear view. He saw what she saw. 2 vehicles, dark sedans, matching our speed exactly 3 cars back. Professional. Patient. Malia was already on her phone again, speaking in rapid Korean that flowed like water over rocks. Sharp consonants, rising and falling tones that somehow sounded both urgent and controlled. She never raised her voice. Never hesitated. Just gave what sounded like coordinates, names, commands, while scrolling through the tablet with her free hand. Rain hammered the windshield in sheets, the wipers barely keeping up. The city's lights smeared into watercolor streaks of red and gold. We exited the highway into a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Industrial blocks, warehouses with broken windows, streets that hadn't seen repair crews in a decade. "They're splitting up," Jong said, his accent thick but his English clear. "One's trying to cut us off at the intersection." Malia glanced at the tablet, at what I realized was a live GPS overlay of the area. "Take Holloway, lose them in the storage district." The SUV swerved right hard enough to throw me against the door. My seatbelt locked, cutting into my chest. Through the rear window, I watched one sedan follow while the other continued straight, trying to parallel us on the next block over. "Who are they?" I heard myself ask, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "Does it matter?" Malia didn't look up from her phone. She was typing now, sending messages with the kind of speed that suggested she'd done this in moving vehicles before. "They want me dead. You're a complication they'll eliminate to get to me." The SUV hydroplaned slightly on a puddle the size of a small pool, and Jong corrected with the casual competence of someone who'd trained for this. We shot through a narrow passage between 2 warehouses, close enough that I could have reached out and touched the corrugated metal walls if the windows had been open. The sedan behind us wasn't as lucky, or as skilled. I heard the screech of metal on metal, saw sparks in the darkness behind us. "One down," Jung said, the others still moving. Malia switched to Korean again, her voice dropping to something that sounded like negotiation. Or threat. Possibly both. She listened, said something that made Jeong's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel, then ended the call. We emerged from the warehouse district into an area that might have been a shipping yard decades ago. Abandoned containers stacked like rusted building blocks, cranes frozen mid-reach against the storm-dark sky. The rain was so heavy now that visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. Perfect cover. Jong killed the headlights and turned down a gap between containers that I wouldn't have thought was wide enough for the SUV. We rolled forward in near-total darkness, the only sound the rain drumming on metal above us, and the quiet rumble of the engine. I held my breath. Beside me, Malia watched the tablet, tracking the remaining sedan's GPS signature. It passed our hiding spot, continued forward, then stopped, reversed. The driver was searching, guessing, probably calling for backup. "How long do we wait?" I whispered. "Until they give up or we get a better opening?" Malia's face was lit from below by the tablet's glow, all sharp shadows and harder angles. She looked like something carved from ice, beautiful and absolutely lethal. 2 minutes passed. 3. The sedan's GPS dots circled the area twice, then finally moved away, heading back toward the main road. Jong waited another 60 seconds before starting forward again, lights still off, navigating by memory and the faint illumination from the tablet. We wound through the container maze, emerged onto a service road, then back into the city proper. But a different part. All high-rises and business districts that looked respectable in daylight, but were probably just as dangerous. Malia made 3 more calls, each in different languages. Korean, then what sounded like Mandarin, then English with an accent I couldn't place. Each conversation was brief, coded, ending with coordinates or names I didn't recognize. "Building 7, she told Jeong, and he nodded. We turned into an underground parking garage beneath a glass tower that looked like any other luxury apartment building. Jeong punched a code into a keypad, and a reinforced gate rolled up. The parking level we entered was empty except for 3 cars, expensive, nondescript, strategically positioned near exits. 2 men in dark suits emerged from a security door as we parked. They moved with military precision, checking the vehicle's exterior for tracking devices, while a third man appeared with what looked like a metal detector wand. Malia stepped out first, straightening her jacket despite the fact that it was soaked through and probably ruined. She spoke to the security team in Korean, pointing back at me, and one of them nodded. "Out," she told me. "Leave everything here. Phone, wallet, any electronics." "What? Why?" "Because if they tracked us here, it's through something you're carrying." Her eyes raked over me with clinical assessment. "Everything. Now." I fumbled with my apron pockets, pulling out my cracked phone, a handful of bills, my expired student ID. One of the security team swept the wand over me, and it beeped near my shoes. "The insole," he said. "There's a chip embedded." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. They're just cheap work shoes." Malia crouched, pulled the insole free, and held it up to the light. There, pressed into the foam, was a thin metallic strip no bigger than a grain of rice. Tracker. In my shoe. In shoes I'd been wearing for 6 months. "How long has Yara had access to your locker?" Malia asked, her voice soft and dangerous. I thought about all the times I'd seen her in the employee break room, chatting with staff, charming everyone with that easy smile. She used to bring us coffee sometimes, said she was bored waiting. I never thought... No one ever does. Malia crushed the insole in her fist, tracker and all, and dropped it into a bag one of the security team held open. "Take these to the waterfront. Make sure they follow." The man nodded and disappeared with my shoes and phone. Come. Malia headed toward an elevator with walls that gleamed like mirrors, her reflection multiplied into infinity. Welcome to your new home, Kimber Duarte. Let's hope you survive it. The elevator doors closed with a whisper, and we rose into darkness. The penthouse looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture in blacks and grays. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than my life. But the windows were bulletproof glass 3 inches thick. The art hid security panels, and the elegant console table by the door concealed enough weapons to start a small war. I knew because one of Malia's security team opened it the moment we entered. Sit. Malia gestured to a chair positioned in the center of the living room, directly under a recessed light that suddenly felt very much like an interrogation lamp. I sat. My soaked uniform squelched against the leather, leaving water stains I'd probably be killed for later. 3 men arranged themselves around the room, not threatening exactly, but positioned with the kind of strategic precision that made it clear I wasn't leaving unless they allowed it. Malia disappeared into another room and returned wearing dry clothes. Black pants, a silk shirt, her hair still damp but no longer dripping. She looked completely composed, like she hadn't just survived an assassination attempt and a high-speed chase. She settled into the chair across from me, crossed her legs, and studied me the way a scientist might study a specimen. Start from the beginning, she said. Everything you heard, everything you saw. So I told her. About taking the dirty plates toward the kitchen. About hearing Yara in the service hallway speaking Spanish. About the fragments I'd understood. Table 7, the glass, 3 in position. About freezing beside the linen cart, too terrified to move, watching Yara walk away. One of the security team, the one with the scar Jong had mentioned, who I now saw extended from his jaw to his collarbone, took notes on a tablet. Another recorded everything on his phone. Why didn't you report it to your manager? The scarred man asked. His name was apparently Han, and his English was better than mine. And say what? That I overheard the driver of a guest plotting murder? They'd think I was crazy. Or high. Probably both. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly freezing in the air-conditioned apartment. I knew I had to warn her. I didn't think past that. Who else did you tell? This from a third man, older, with silver threading his black hair. No one. I wrote the note and My voice cracked. I handed it to her. That's it. Malia leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her dark eyes boring into mine. You expect me to believe you risked your life for a stranger out of pure altruism? I expect you to believe I'm not a killer, I shot back, and immediately regretted the edge in my voice when every man in the room tensed. I'm sorry, I watch people die every day at work. Not at the restaurant, at the hospital. My brother. The words stuck in my throat. Your brother, Malia repeated softly. Something flickered across her face. Kimber Duarte, 26, nursing student, dropped out 8 months ago, working 2 jobs, Azure Pearl and St. Catherine's Medical Center night shift. No criminal record, no known associates in organized crime. She rattled off my life like reading a grocery list. Brother Miguel Duarte, age 19, hit-and-run victim, currently at Memorial General in a medically induced coma. The room tilted. How do you... I know everything about everyone who touches my life, Kimber. It's how I stay alive. She nodded to Han, who pulled up something on the tablet and handed it to her. Memorial General. Your brother was admitted 7 months ago. Severe head trauma, multiple surgeries, ongoing care. The bills, she scrolled. Total just over $400,000 and climbing. I felt sick. I'm on a payment plan. I'm handling it. You're drowning in it, Malia interrupted. According to this, you're 3 months behind. Your wages are being garnished. You've maxed out 2 credit cards. She looked up. The hospital should have transferred him to county care months ago. Do you know why they didn't? I shook my head, fear crawling up my spine. Malia turned the tablet to show me a document I'd never seen before. A foundation. The Booth Memorial Foundation. It had covered 60% of Miguel's bills. 60% of $400,000. That's not possible. My voice came out as a whisper. I never applied for any foundation. The hospital applied on your behalf. Standard procedure for cases exceeding 200,000. Malia set the tablet down with careful precision. The Booth Memorial Foundation is one of my shell organizations. Tax shelter, charitable cover. It funds exactly 3 things: bribes, money laundering, and occasionally medical care for people who can't afford it. She leaned back. Your brother has been my responsibility for 7 months. I've kept him alive, Kimber, and you didn't even know. The implications crashed over me like cold water. I'm saying that the woman you saved tonight has been saving your brother since last spring. I'm saying that fate has a sense of irony. Malia stood, walked to the windows overlooking the city. Rain still streaked the glass, distorting the lights below into abstract patterns. I'm also saying that this connection makes you useful. Yara knew about the foundation. She would have known your brother's care was tied to me. If she'd succeeded tonight. Miguel would have been cut off, I finished, the words tasting like ash. He would have died. Eventually, yes. Malia's reflection in the window was ghostly, doubled. So you had every reason to keep me alive beyond altruism. You just didn't know it yet. I wanted to argue, to say that I hadn't known, that I'd acted on pure instinct, that this was all just horrific coincidence. But looking at the tablet, at the documents showing my brother's bills being paid by a woman I'd served twice and never really seen, I felt something shift in my understanding of the world. Nothing was random. Everything was connected. And I'd just stepped into a web I didn't know existed. What happens now? I asked. Malia turned from the window. In the recessed lighting, her face was all sharp angles and darker shadows. Now, you stay here. You tell me everything you remember about Yara, every conversation, every detail, every person she interacted with at the restaurant. You help me figure out who bought her loyalty and what they're planning next. She crossed her arms. And if you're very lucky and very useful, I might let you live long enough to see your brother wake up. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I saved your life, I said quietly, and I've been saving your brother's. Malia's smile was cold. Now we're even. Everything after this, you'll have to earn. Han appeared with a towel and dry clothes, expensive athletic wear that would probably fit. Guest room is down the hall. Shower, rest. We'll start again in 4 hours. I stood on shaking legs, took the clothes, and followed him toward a hallway that probably led to a bedroom more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever slept. Behind me, I heard Malia already on the phone again, speaking in Korean, coordinating, planning, surviving. I'd saved her life without knowing she'd been saving Miguel's. And now we were bound together by debts neither of us had chosen. Her to me to her, and both of us to the ghost of Yara Castillo's betrayal. I stepped into the guest room and closed the door, listening to it lock automatically from the outside. Saved or captured. At this point, I wasn't sure there was a difference. I didn't sleep. How could I? The guest room was nicer than any apartment I'd ever lived in. King bed with sheets that felt like water, a bathroom with heated floors, a view of the city that stretched to the horizon. But the door was locked from the outside, and the windows didn't open, and every luxury felt like gilded bars on a very expensive cage. I showered because I didn't know what else to do. Watched Miguel's blood and someone else's blood and the rain from tonight swirl down the drain. Put on the clothes Han had given me. Gray joggers and a black t-shirt that fit perfectly. which somehow made everything worse. She had my size. She'd known my size before I even arrived. When the door finally unlocked 4 hours later, dawn was breaking over the city in shades of rose and gold that felt obscene given everything that had happened. Han appeared in the doorway. She wants to see you. I found Malia in what could only be called a war room, a windowless space lined with monitors showing security feeds from locations I didn't recognize. The scarred man, Zhong, and 2 others I hadn't seen before, stood around a table covered in tablets and photographs. They looked up when I entered, assessed me with the collective weight of predators deciding if I was threat or prey, then returned to their work. Malia stood before the largest monitor, arms crossed, watching footage of the Azure Pearl from last night. She'd changed again, tailored pants, a crisp white shirt, her hair pulled back severe and perfect. She looked like she'd slept 8 hours instead of none. Coffee? She gestured to a pot on a side table without turning around. I don't... My stomach twisted. I'm not really hungry. I didn't ask if you were hungry. I asked if you wanted coffee. She finally looked at me, and her expression was unreadable. You're going to need it. I poured a cup with shaking hands. It was better than anything I'd ever made at home, dark and smooth and probably cost more per pound than I made in a day. Malia tapped the screen, and the footage zoomed in on the entrance to the Azure Pearl. Timestamp, 7:43 p.m. Yara's car pulling up, Yara stepping out, scanning the street with professional efficiency. Then Yara walking away, getting into a different vehicle 3 blocks down, disappearing into traffic. She never intended to be there, Malia said quietly. She positioned the car, made it look like standard protocol, then evacuated before the shooting started. Clean, professional, cowardly. She switched to different footage, the service hallway. There I was, frozen beside the linen cart, clearly listening to something off camera. The timestamp showed 7:18 p.m., 25 minutes before the attack. You stood there for 43 seconds, Malia observed. 43 seconds where you could have walked away, pretended you heard nothing, gone home to your brother's hospital room, and your 2 jobs, and your quiet, safe life. She turned to face me fully. Why didn't you? I told you told me about mercy, about nurses and altruism and not letting someone die. She moved closer, and I fought the urge to back up. I want to know the real reason, Kimber. Because people don't risk their lives for strangers without a reason. What do you want? The question hung in the air like a blade. I want my brother to wake up, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to not be drowning in debt. I want to finish nursing school. I stopped, because saying it out loud made it sound pathetic. I want to matter. To someone. To anyone. Something flickered in Malia's eyes. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Well, congratulations. You matter now. Unfortunately for you, that comes with consequences. She pulled up a new document on the screen. The Booth Memorial Foundation paperwork. All the payments made to Memorial General on Miguel's behalf. This foundation is mine. Every dollar that's kept your brother alive has come from me. From operations you probably find morally reprehensible. Drug distribution, money laundering, protection rackets. She said it like reading a menu. That medicine keeping him sedated? Paid for with blood money? Those nurses monitoring his vitals? Their salaries come from the same place. My coffee cup rattled against its saucer. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand something very clearly. Malia stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and cold. You saved my life last night. That creates a debt. But I've been saving your brother's life for 7 months. That creates a different kind of debt. A deeper one. So we're not even close to even. Her voice dropped, soft and deadly. You witnessed Yara's exact words. You can testify to her betrayal in a language the other families will understand. Your leverage against whoever bought her loyalty. Your proof I was betrayed, not outmaneuvered. She tilted her head. And if they're smart, they'll try to kill you to eliminate that proof. The room felt suddenly airless. You're using me as bait. I'm keeping you alive, Malia corrected. There's a difference, but yes, your usefulness extends beyond testimony. They'll come for you, and when they do, I'll be ready. And if I refuse? If I just leave? Malia's smile was terrible in its gentleness. Then I stop the foundation payments. I call Memorial General and tell them to transfer your brother to county care, where he'll receive minimal treatment until his insurance runs out. Which, she glanced at the screen, happens in 16 days. After that? She shrugged. They'll keep him comfortable while he dies. It might take weeks. It might take months. But he will die, Kimber. The words hit like physical blows. You can't. I can. I will. Because this is the world you stepped into when you wrote that note. Malia's expression hardened into something carved from ice. You saved my life. That was beautiful and brave and phenomenally stupid. Now I own yours. Your choices. Your safety. Your brother's survival. All of it belongs to me until I decide this debt is paid. That's not... I struggled for words. That's not fair. Fair? Malia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Fairness is a luxury for people who don't have to survive. You want fair? Go back in time and don't write that. Note. Don't listen in service hallways. Don't work at restaurants where women like me eat dinner. She leaned in until our faces were inches apart. But you did. And now you're here. And the only choice you have left is whether you fight with me or die against me. Silence filled the room like floodwater. What do you need me to do? I heard myself ask. Malia straightened, satisfaction flickering across her features. Everything I tell you, when I tell you, without question, starting now. She gestured to Han, who produced a phone, new, expensive, probably untraceable. You'll call the hospital. Tell them you're safe. Tell them you'll be away for a while, but the bills are covered. Then you'll help me find every thread Yara left behind. I took the phone with numb fingers. Welcome to your new life, Kimber Duarte. Malia returned to her monitors, already dismissing me. I hope you survive it long enough to see your brother again. I stood there, phone in hand, the weight of her words pressing down like atmosphere. Saved or captured? The question had an answer now. Both. Always both. The first lesson happened over breakfast on day 3. I was eating eggs I hadn't cooked in a kitchen I wasn't allowed to use when Malia sat down across from me with nothing but black coffee. She studied me with those dark, calculating eyes until I set my fork down, appetite gone. Han just walked past the doorway, she said. Without looking, tell me what hand he favors. I blinked. What? His dominant hand, the one he'd draw a weapon with. You have 3 seconds. My mind scrambled. I don't... Left? I think he's left-handed? Wrong. He's right-handed but keeps his primary weapon on his left hip in a cross-draw because he has limited mobility in his right shoulder from a bullet wound 3 years ago. Malia sipped her coffee. You've been here 72 hours. You've seen him 40 times. You should know this. I don't think like that. Then learn. She stood. Because the moment you leave this building, everyone you meet will be reading you the same way. They'll know your exits, your weaknesses, what hand you write with, where you keep your phone, whether you're armed. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. They'll know if you're worth killing before you even know you're in danger. The eggs turned to ash in my mouth. That afternoon, Malia made me walk the perimeter of the penthouse 20 times, memorizing every exit, every angle, every piece of furniture that could be used as cover or weapon. She pointed to a decorative vase worth probably $10,000 and asked what I'd do if someone came through the door shooting. Hide? I suggested. Wrong. You throw the vase. Not at them. At the light fixture above them. Glass and darkness give you 3 seconds. You use those seconds to reach the panic button behind the Rothko painting, or the gun taped under the dining table, or the reinforced closet in the primary bedroom. She demonstrated each location with clinical precision. Hiding makes you a stationary target. Movement keeps you alive. By day 5, she'd moved on to reading people. She showed me photographs of men in suits and asked me to identify which ones were dangerous. Him, I pointed to a man with visible tattoos and a scar across his cheek. He's a mid-level enforcer. Dangerous, yes, but predictable. Malia tapped another photo, a man in an expensive suit with a kind face and silver hair. This one ordered 17 executions last year. He smiles when he lies and never raises his voice. He's the one who'll kill you over dinner and tip the server on his way out. I stared at the photograph, at the man who looked like someone's gentle grandfather. Violence you can see is rarely the violence that kills you, Malia said quietly. It's the man who holds the door, the woman who compliments your dress, the friend who knows exactly where you'll be and when. She looked at me, and something shifted in her expression. It's the driver who brings you coffee and asks about your day for 3 years. The ghost of Yara hung between us like smoke. By the end of the first week, I could identify concealed weapons by the way someone walked, spot surveillance by the pattern of parked cars, and knew the hierarchy of the city's criminal organizations well enough to know who Malia could trust. A list so short it barely existed, and who wanted her dead, which was significantly longer. The lessons were brutal in their intimacy. Malia stood behind me, her breath against my ear as she pointed out the tell in a security guard's posture. See how he keeps his weight forward? He's expecting confrontation. He's afraid. Her hand on my wrist, adjusting my grip on the gun she'd finally let me hold. Like this. Firm but not tense. You're not trying to strangle it. You're asking it to work with you. Her fingers tilting my chin up when I couldn't meet her eyes after freezing during a simulation. Fear is acceptable. Paralysis will get you killed. Feel the fear and move anyway. I hated how her proximity made my pulse race. Fear and something else I refused to name coiling together until I couldn't distinguish between them. I hated how I'd started to anticipate her approval, craving the small nod when I identified a threat correctly or executed a movement the way she'd taught me. On day 9, she had me follow Zhang through the building's parking garage, staying unseen. I made it 3 levels before he turned and pressed a knife to my throat so fast I hadn't even seen him move. Better. Malia's voice came from behind me. You lasted 40 seconds longer than last time. The knife disappeared. I stood there shaking, heart hammering, Zhang's cologne still in my nose. Again, Malia said. We went again. And again. And again, until I could shadow Zhang for 5 full minutes before he caught me. Until I learned to use reflections and sound and the subtle shift in air pressure that meant someone was close. Why are you doing this? I asked one night when she was teaching me to identify escape routes in photographs of restaurants and hotels. I'm supposed to be bait, right? Why bother training me? Malia didn't look up from the images. Dead bait is useless. Live bait that fights back is much more interesting. She tapped a photo of a hotel lobby. 3 exits. Where are they? Front entrance, service corridor behind the concierge desk, emergency stairs past the elevators. I'd learned to see buildings as escape puzzles, every space a potential trap or salvation. But that's not really why. She finally met my eyes, and for just a moment, her perfect control slipped. No, it's not. She stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. I had someone once who I trusted completely. Someone I trained personally, who knew every protocol, every safe house, every weakness in my organization. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, doubled. She sold me out for money I would have given her if she'd asked. Yara. Always Yara. I can't afford to trust anyone again, Malia continued. But I can afford to make sure you're dangerous enough that betraying me would be suicide. I can afford to give you the tools to survive and see if you're smart enough to use them for both of us instead of just yourself. I stood, crossed to where she was standing, close enough to see our reflections side by side. What if I'm not? Smart enough, I mean. Malia turned, and suddenly we were inches apart, her dark eyes searching mine. Then you'll die, probably taking me with you. Her hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw. But I don't think you will. You're learning too fast, adapting too well. Her voice dropped to something almost soft. You're starting to think like someone who belongs in this world. The space between us felt electric, dangerous, weighted with things neither of us would say. I don't want to belong here, I whispered. Neither did I. Her thumb traced my cheekbone. But here we are anyway. Two women bound by debt and blood and the ghost of someone who betrayed us both. She stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. Again. 10 more locations. You have 3 seconds per exit. But my hands shook as I reached for the photographs, and it wasn't from fear anymore. The breakthrough came on day 12, at 3 a.m, when Han burst into the war room where Malia and I had been reviewing shipping manifests for hours. We found her, he said in Korean, then switched to English when he remembered I was there. Yara, we found the money trail. Malia was on her feet before he finished speaking, crossing to the main monitor where he was already pulling up files. I followed, my exhaustion forgotten, watching numbers and bank statements cascade across the screen. Yara Castillo opened 4 accounts in the past 8 months, Han explained, highlighting transactions in red. Small deposits, irregular timing, always under 10,000 to avoid reporting requirements, total accumulation, $260,000. From where? Malia leaned forward, her reflection ghosting over the data. That's the interesting part. Han pulled up another layer of information. Casino transactions, loan documents, collection notices. She had gambling debts, started small, spiraled fast. By January, she owed $400,000 to 3 different bookies. He tapped the screen. Then all the debts were purchased by a single entity, consolidated, forgiven. In exchange for what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. In exchange for you, Malia said softly, her eyes never leaving the screen. Who bought the debts? Han pulled up a corporate structure that looked like a maze. Shell companies within shell companies, addresses in the Caymans and Singapore and Delaware. But at the center, barely visible through the layers of obfuscation, was a name. Valdez Holdings. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Valdez, Malia repeated, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. The acknowledgement of a predator meeting another predator's scent. Diego Valdez is making a move. Who's Diego Valdez? I asked. Malia turned to me, and in the blue glow of the monitors, her face looked carved from ice. The Valdez Syndicate controls everything south of the river. Distribution, labor, protection. Diego inherited the operation from his father 2 years ago, and has been expanding aggressively. She pulled up a photograph, a man in his 40s, handsome in a dangerous way, with silver threading his dark hair and eyes that looked dead even when he smiled. He's been trying to absorb my territories for 18 months. I've refused every offer, blocked every aggressive play, eliminated every incursion. So he decided to eliminate you instead, I finished. And make it look like an internal betrayal. Yara kills me, no one knows he was involved, and in the chaos of succession, he sweeps in to claim the disputed territories. Malia's jaw tightened. Clean, almost elegant. Han cleared his throat. There's more. We intercepted communications about an auction. Next week. Private. Invitation only. He pulled up what looked like a cryptic invitation written in half a dozen languages. They're dividing your territories, Malia. They think you're dead or close enough. Your shipping routes, your distribution networks, your protection contracts, they're selling them off like a state liquidation. The air in the room felt combustible. Where? Malia's voice was deadly calm. The old Berkshire building, converted warehouse district. Han zoomed in on a map. Underground 3 levels, single entrance, heavily guarded. Guest list is encrypted, but... He paused, and something that might have been satisfaction crossed his face. Yara Castillo is confirmed to attend. She's collecting her payment. Silence settled over us like snow. I watched Malia process the information, saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and absolutely lethal. How much has been liquidated already? Nothing. The auction is the opening bid. They're waiting to see who wants what before they finalize the carve-up. Han pulled up a list of attendees, names I didn't recognize, but that clearly meant something to Malia. Every major player will be there. Russians, Italians, the Chicago families, even the Koreans who've been trying to push you out for years. They're making an example, I said, understanding clicking into place. If they can take you down and sell off your empire in front of everyone, it shows the old guard is vulnerable. It changes the power structure of the entire city. Malia looked at me with something that might have been pride. She learns fast, she said to Han. Then to me. Yes. This isn't just about territory. It's about perception. If Valdez can make me disappear and no one challenges him, he becomes untouchable. So we crash the auction, I said. We show up alive and prove Yara betrayed you. We expose Valdez in front of everyone. We? Malia's eyebrow arched. You think you're coming? You said I'm the proof, the witness to Yara's exact words. I held her gaze. And you've spent almost 2 weeks training me. You don't waste that kind of time on someone you plan to leave behind. Something flickered in her expression. Approval mixed with something darker. It's dangerous. If we're recognized before we're ready, we'll be dead before we reach the bidding floor. Everything about this has been dangerous, I shot back. At least this time I get to do something other than memorize exits and follow Zhang through parking garages. Han coughed, possibly hiding a laugh. Malia studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Han, get me everything on the Berkshire building. Security, layout, attendance list. I want to know every person who'll be in that room and exactly how many bullets it'll take to get us out alive. She turned back to the screen showing Yara's photograph. Beautiful, traitorous Yara with her easy smile and dead eyes. And find out what Valdez promised her. I want to know the exact price of her loyalty before I make her pay it back in blood. Han disappeared to execute orders, leaving Malia and me alone with the glowing screens and the weight of what was coming. Are you sure about this? Malia asked quietly. Once we walk into that auction, there's no going back. Every criminal organization in the city will know your face, your name. They'll know you stood with me against Valdez. You'll never be invisible again. I thought about Miguel in his hospital bed, about the person I'd been 2 weeks ago, struggling, invisible, powerless, about the person I was becoming under Malia's brutal tutelage. I haven't been invisible since I wrote that note, I said. I'd rather be dangerous. Malia's smile was sharp as a knife. Then let's go remind them why they should have made sure I was dead before they tried to sell my empire. She pulled up the auction details, and we began to plan. The Berkshire building looked abandoned from the outside, crumbling brick, boarded windows, graffiti layered thick as paint. But the moment we passed through the industrial door, guarded by 2 men with earpieces and concealed weapons, we descended into a different world entirely. 3 levels down, accessible only by a freight elevator that required both a keycard and facial recognition, the converted warehouse opened into something that belonged in a European palace. Vaulted ceilings with restored ironwork, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my brother's hospital bills, marble floors polished to mirror shine. The air smelled like expensive cologne and older money, with an undercurrent of something darker. Violence wearing a tailored suit. Malia moved through the entrance with the confident stride of someone who belonged, her disguise perfect in its simplicity. Dark wig cut into a severe bob, contacts that turned her eyes from deep brown to glacial blue, a charcoal suit that suggested power without ostentation. She'd introduced herself at the door as Mei Chen, representative of the San Francisco Kim family, neutral territory, wealthy enough to bid seriously, unknown enough to not raise immediate questions. I walked 2 steps behind her as her assistant, clipboard in hand, my own transformation equally complete. Blonde wig, heavy-framed glasses, makeup that made me look older and harder. Conservative dress, sensible heels, the kind of invisible efficiency that marked trusted staff in this world. We'd rehearsed this for 3 days, how I'd stand, where I'd look, what I'd say if directly addressed. The answer to that last one was, as little as possible. The auction floor was arranged like a theater, with raised platforms displaying the lots. Not physical objects, but projections. Digital maps showing territories, shipping routes, distribution networks. Malia's empire, dissected and displayed like a body on an autopsy table. Around 50 people filled the space, arranged in clusters by organization. I recognized faces from the photographs Malia had made me memorize. The Volkov brothers in their identical gray suits. The Chicago families represented by an older woman in diamonds who looked like someone's grandmother and had reportedly ordered 9 executions last year. Korean syndicate representatives who would be Malia's own people if they knew she was alive. And there, near the bar in the corner, surrounded by men in expensive suits who deferred to her like she was royalty, Yara Castillo. My breath caught. Malia's hand found the small of my back, a warning pressure. Stay calm, stay in character. Yara looked different, confident. She wore a red dress that probably cost $5,000, diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. Her hair, styled in loose waves instead of the professional ponytail I remembered. She laughed at something one of the men said, touching his arm with casual intimacy, and the sound carried across the room like breaking glass. "That's Valdez's second," Malia murmured, her accent perfect, her voice pitched to carry only to me. "Marco Reyes. If he's here and not Diego, it means Diego's confident enough to send lieutenants, or paranoid enough to stay away from the crime scene." We moved through the room, Malia nodding to various players, exchanging minimal pleasantries in Mandarin and Korean and English. I kept my eyes down, my clipboard up, playing my role. But I felt Yara's presence like a physical weight. Magnetic and repulsive. The auction master, a thin man in a tuxedo who looked like an art dealer, called everyone to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this evening's proceedings. We have several exceptional opportunities available, formerly under the management of the late Malia Booth." Late. They'd already written her obituary. "Lot 1, the auctioneer continued, and a map bloomed on the projection screen. "Port access and shipping routes, primary corridor for Pacific imports, opening bid, 5 million. Hands raised, bids flew. I watched Malia's empire get carved up piece by piece, sold to the highest bidder like furniture at an estate sale. Her face remained perfectly neutral. But I saw her jaw tighten, saw the barely perceptible flex of her fingers. Between lots, during a brief intermission, I watched Yara accept a glass of champagne from Marco Reyes. She toasted with the men around her, celebrating the death of the woman who'd employed her, trusted her, treated her like family for 3 years. "I want to kill her," I whispered to Malia as we pretended to review auction materials. "Not yet," Malia replied, her voice soft as silk and just as dangerous. "Let her feel safe. Let her collect her payment and bask in her success. The fall is so much more satisfying from greater heights. Lot 3, Lot 4, Lot 5. Each piece of Malia's organization purchased by rivals, absorbed, erased. I felt rage building in my chest, not just for Malia, but for the principle of it. The arrogance of men like Valdez who thought they could eliminate someone and face no consequences. During the next intermission, Yara moved toward the bar, separated from her protective cluster of Valdez lieutenants. Malia's hand tightened on my arm. "Now," she said. "Follow my lead." We approached the bar, Malia's stride purposeful but unhurried. She positioned herself directly beside Yara, close enough that their shoulders almost touched as she ordered in accented English. "Whiskey, neat, Glenfiddich if you have it." Yara glanced over, her expression polite but disinterested, right up until she met Malia's eyes. I watched recognition slam into her like a physical blow. Saw her face go pale beneath expensive makeup. Saw her hand tremble as she set down her champagne glass. "You," she breathed, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "You're supposed to be dead?" Malia smiled, and it was terrible. Yes, I was supposed to be. But I had help. A guardian angel in a waitress uniform. She gestured to me without breaking eye contact with Yara. "You remember the Azure Pearl, don't you? You remember making that phone call?" Yara's eyes darted to me, widening further. "You, the server." "Kimber Duarte," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through my veins. "I heard everything, every word, every language, every instruction you gave to the men who were supposed to kill her." The bartender set down Malia's whiskey. She lifted it, took a slow sip, her eyes never leaving Yara's face. "So here's what's going to happen," Malia said quietly. "You're going to walk with us to the center of this room. You're going to stand there while I introduce myself to every criminal organization that just tried to buy pieces of my still-living empire. And then," her smile widened, "we're going to have a very public conversation about loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of selling out the woman who saved your life 4 times. Yara's hand moved toward her clutch, toward whatever weapon she'd concealed there. But Zhang materialized behind her, his hand catching her wrist with practiced efficiency. "I wouldn't," he said pleasantly. "Ms. Chen has more security here than you realize." Yara's face cycled through emotions: fear, fury, calculation, despair. Finally, she straightened, lifted her chin with defiant pride even as her eyes betrayed her terror. "Valdez will kill you before you leave this building." "Maybe," Malia acknowledged, "but you'll be dead first, and everyone here will know exactly what you did and who ordered it. Shall we?" She gestured toward the auction floor, where the next lot was being prepared. The last lot, the final piece of her empire. Time to take it all back. Malia didn't walk Yara to the center of the room. She dragged her there by sheer force of presence, Zhang's hand on Yara's elbow, ensuring compliance while I followed with my clipboard pressed to my chest like armor. Every conversation in the warehouse died as we crossed the marble floor, 50 pairs of eyes tracking our movement with predatory interest. The auctioneer paused mid-sentence, his carefully modulated voice faltering. "Excuse me, but this is highly irregular." "Forgive the interruption," Malia said, her accent disappearing like smoke, her voice ringing clear across the vaulted space. She reached up and removed the wig, the contacts, letting them fall to the floor with deliberate ceremony. "But I believe there's been a mistake. You've been auctioning off my territories. I'm here to correct that error." The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos. Voices erupting in a dozen languages, weapons appearing from concealed holsters, chairs scraping back as organizations prepared for violence or escape. The Volkov brothers were on their feet. The Chicago grandmother had her hand inside her purse. The Korean representatives had formed a protective circle. "Malia Booth," someone breathed, and the name rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. "Very much alive," Malia confirmed. She gestured to Yara, who who stood frozen with Zhong's hand still on her arm. Thanks to a failure in execution. Would you like to explain to everyone how you sold me out, Yara? Or should I? Yara's face had gone from pale to gray. You can't. Can't what? Expose you in front of the very people you helped betray me to. Malaya pulled out her phone with theatrical precision. I have evidence. Audio, recorded by the Azure Pearls security system on the night you made your arrangements. Would you like to hear it? Malia, please. Yara's voice cracked. You don't understand. Then explain. Malia's voice dropped to something colder than winter. Explain why the woman I trusted with my life sold me to Valdez. Explain it to me and everyone here. The crowd pressed closer, a tightening circle. In the back, I saw Marco Reyes on his phone, undoubtedly calling for reinforcements. Han and two others I recognized from the penthouse had positioned themselves near the exits. This was a trap about to spring, and we were standing at its center. Yara's composure shattered. I had no choice! The debts! Valdez bought my debts. He owned me. You had a choice, Malia interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. You could have come to me. I've erased debts for a dozen people in my organization. You think I wouldn't have helped you? $400,000! Yara shouted, and the number hung in the air like an accusation. 400,000 in gambling debts, Malia. I didn't know how to. So you sold me instead. Malia pressed play on the recording. Yara's voice filled the warehouse, clear and damning even through the phone speaker. Sí, ella saldrá por el frente como siempre. Ten a tu gente lista. The Spanish phrases I'd heard in the service hallway, now preserved forever. Mesa siete, cerca del vidrio, tres en posición afuera. I watched faces in the crowd change as they processed what they were hearing. A driver, trusted security, giving specific instructions for an assassination. This wasn't a hit authorized by the organization. This was betrayal, bought and paid for by a rival. The recording continued. Yara switching between Spanish and Portuguese, coordinating timing and position and payment. When it finally ended, the silence was even more complete than before. Kimber, Malia said, and I stepped forward, removing my own wig and glasses. Tell them what you heard. My voice shook but held. I was in the service hallway of the Azure Pearl. I heard Yara Castillo confirm the assassination plan. Table 7 near the glass. 3 men positioned outside. 1 in the back alley. She gave the exact exit route Ms. Booth would take. I looked directly at Yara. She said, make it clean. A waitress, one of the Volkov brothers said, his English heavily accented. You trust a waitress testimony? I trust someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by warning me, Malia replied. She saved my life knowing she'd become a target. How many of you would do the same? The question landed like a stone in still water. This is very interesting, the Chicago grandmother said, her voice soft and deadly. But it doesn't change the fact that we've made purchases tonight. Binding agreements. Agreements based on the presumption of my death, Malia countered. I'm not dead. Therefore, the territories weren't available for sale. Your purchases are void. Valdez will have something to say about that, Marco Reyes called from the back, and I saw his hand moving inside his jacket. I'm sure he will, Malia said calmly. Is he here? Or did he send you to do his bidding while he stayed safely away from the consequences? Marco's jaw tightened. Around the room I saw organizations exchanging glances, recalculating. Valdez had orchestrated this, but he hadn't shown his face. That meant something in this world. It meant weakness. Cowardice. The question you all need to ask yourselves, Malia continued, her voice carrying to every corner, is whether you want to align with someone who operates through treachery and hired traitors, or whether you want to maintain the old agreements, the ones based on respect and direct confrontation. She paused. I've never hidden behind proxies. I've never bought another person's debts to control them. When I have a problem with someone, I face them directly. Pretty speech, Marco said, and his gun was suddenly in his hand, pointing at Malia. But speeches don't change reality. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and standing in the middle of a room full of people who just paid good money for pieces of your empire. You think any of them are going to help you? For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then the Korean representatives stood, weapons drawn but pointing at Marco instead of Malia. The old agreements stand, their leader said in Korean, which Malia translated in a clear voice. Treachery is not our way. The Volkov brothers remained seated but didn't raise their weapons. Neutral, but not hostile. The Chicago grandmother actually smiled. How very dramatic, she said. I haven't seen a power play this bold in 20 years. She stood, smoothing her dress. My family abstains. We're not taking sides in a Korean succession dispute. More organizations declaring positions, some supporting Malia, some staying neutral, some, like the 3 families who'd bid highest, closing ranks around Marco and the Valdez interests. The warehouse had become a powder keg, and Marco's gun was the lit match. You made a mistake coming here, he said to Malia. No, Malia replied, her hand finding mine, our fingers interlacing. You made a mistake thinking I'd let you have my empire without a fight. Marco pulled the trigger, and the warehouse exploded into violence. The first bullet missed Malia by inches. I felt the displacement of air as it passed between us. Then Jong returned fire, and the world became noise and smoke and bodies moving with lethal precision. Malia pulled me down behind an overturned table as gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. The Korean representatives engaged Marco's people, muzzle flashes lighting up the warehouse like strobe lights. The Volkov brothers were shouting in Russian, taking cover behind marble pillars. Glass from the shattered chandeliers rained down like lethal snow. Stay down, Malia ordered, her own weapon, a compact 9mm that had been concealed somewhere in her suit, already in her hand. She fired twice over the table's edge, and I heard someone scream. But I wasn't looking at the firefight. I was watching Yara. She'd used the chaos to break free from Jeong's grip and was running toward a side exit. Her red dress hiked up to her thighs, her expensive heels abandoned on the marble floor. She was going to escape. After everything, the betrayal, the recording, the public exposure, she was just going to disappear into the smoke and violence. Something in me snapped. I grabbed the gun Malia had made me carry, the one I'd protested taking, the one she'd insisted I might need, and I ran. Not away from the danger, but into it, chasing Yara through the chaos with training I'd absorbed but never thought I'd use. She made it to the exit. But Marco's second, a man built like a brick wall who I recognized from Malia's intelligence photos, was there first, blocking Malia's escape route. He saw me coming, saw the weapon in my hand, and smiled like this was going to be easy. He was reaching for his own gun when I fired. The recoil shocked through my arms. The sound was impossibly loud even through the ambient gunfire. And the man, the enforcer, the killer, the obstacle between me and Yara dropped like someone had cut his strings. I'd killed him. I'd pointed a weapon at another human being and pulled the trigger and ended his life. My hands shook. My vision tunneled. But my feet kept moving. Yara had frozen in the exit, staring at me with something between horror and recognition. Kimber? You don't get to run, I said, my voice coming from somewhere distant and cold. Not after what you did. Behind me, I heard Malia shouting my name, but I couldn't process it. Couldn't process anything except Yara standing there alive when she should be dead. When she'd tried to make Malia dead. Yara's hand moved, toward a weapon, toward escape, it didn't matter. But Malia was suddenly there beside me, her gun pressed to Yara's temple with surgical precision. Don't, Malia said softly. Give me one reason, just one. Yara's face crumpled. No defiance left, no pride, just naked fear. Please, Malia, please, I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. Malia's finger tightened on the trigger. You're sorry Valdez didn't pay you enough to disappear completely. You're sorry your greed and cowardice led you here. But you're not sorry you betrayed me. I am. Yara's voice broke. I am sorry, I swear. The gunshot echoed through the exit corridor, but it hadn't come from Malia's weapon. Marco Reyes stood at the other end of the hallway, his gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Yara's body crumpled between us, the red of her dress now matching the blood spreading across the concrete. Loose ends, Marco said simply, then turned his weapon toward us. Malia and I fired simultaneously. Marco went down hard, his gun clattering across the floor. For 5 seconds, the only sound was our breathing and distant gunfire from the main warehouse. Then Malia grabbed my arm. We're leaving, now. The Korean representatives had cleared us a path to a service exit on the opposite side. Bodies littered the marble floor. I didn't look at faces, couldn't afford to process who'd survived and who hadn't. Han met us at the exit with the SUV already running. We drove in silence through streets that looked impossibly normal. People walking dogs, couples leaving restaurants, the city continuing like the world hadn't just fractured. My hands were still shaking. I could smell gunpowder and blood and expensive perfume that might have been mine or Yara's or both. You killed someone, Malia said finally, her voice neutral. To save me, you crossed that line. I know. My voice sounded hollow. You can't uncross it. You understand that? I know. We reached the penthouse as dawn was breaking, painting the city in shades of gold and pink that felt obscene. Malia dismissed Han and the others, leaving us alone in the war room with its monitors showing the aftermath. Emergency services at the Berkshire building, news crews setting up perimeters, the criminal underworld scrambling to process what had happened. You have a choice now, Malia said, pouring whiskey with steady hands despite everything. I can set you up somewhere far from here. New identity, new life. Your brother's care will continue, guaranteed, no strings. You walk away from this world and never look back. She handed me a glass. Or you stay. You help me rebuild. You become what you've been training to be these past 2 weeks. Someone who belongs in this world. Someone dangerous. Someone essential. I looked at the whiskey. At Malia's face in the dawn light. At my reflection in the dark windows. I thought about the person I'd been 3 weeks ago. Invisible, powerless, drowning. I thought about the person I'd become, someone who'd fired a weapon to save another human being, someone who'd stared down crime lords and survived. I thought about Miguel, about seeing him again with blood under my fingernails. If I stay, I said slowly, what does that make me? Mine, Malia said simply. My partner, my strategist, my second set of eyes. She paused. The person who saved my life and chose to keep saving it. I drank the whiskey. It burned going down, but it felt like clarity. I stay. 6 weeks later, I stood in Miguel's hospital room, watching him open his eyes for the first time in 8 months. His confusion cleared slowly, his gaze finding my face and trying to reconcile the person he saw with the sister he remembered. Kim. His voice was rough from disuse. You look different. I smiled, squeezing his hand. A lot has changed. Behind me, Malia waited in the hallway. My partner, my anchor, the woman whose empire I'd helped reclaim from the ashes. The Korean representatives had reaffirmed their alliances. The Valdez syndicate was in chaos, its leadership decimated. And I, invisible waitress Kimber Duarte, had become the second most dangerous woman in the room wherever I walked. Tell me everything, Miguel said, trying to sit up. I helped him, thinking about where to even begin. How to explain that I'd saved a life and taken a life and discovered something essential about myself in the space between. Later, I promised, when you're stronger. Right now, just know that you're safe. We're both safe, and that's never changing again. Outside, the city continued. Inside, I'd become someone who could protect what mattered. The invisible waitress was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, forged in violence and choice. Someone who'd finally stopped hiding. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.